Hi, welcome to the interview with the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Mr. Gaston Browne. Mr. Gaston Browne, Mr. Prime Minister, how was the atmosphere that you feel in this new period of the United Nations General Assembly?
Yeah, well, it's an important assembly for us to hear our views on various hemispheric and international issues. There are many issues even within our own hemisphere. The issue of Haiti, stabilizing Haiti, restoring democracy, and perhaps we can, for once and for all, put Haiti on the path of prosperity. So that is one of the hemispheric issues. That the issue of climate change, that is a global issue. It is the most significant existential threat facing all of humanity. Small states in the Caribbean, we are on the front lines of climate change. We continue to suffer from the consequences of these ferocious storms, frequent storms, and even other aspects of climate change that is hurting us. Practically all aspects of climate change, so ocean acidification, the bleaching of our coral reefs, sea level rise as a result of the warming of the seas, heat waves, droughts, floods, all of the consequences. So, the United Nations General Assembly give us the opportunity to come here and to speak about those issues. More recently, we have seen a proliferation of ammunition and guns and ammunition, and we are seeing an increase in homicides as a result of these guns. But the irony is they're not manufactured in the Caribbean. They're imported primarily from the United States. They represent a significant threat to us in terms of the amount of homicides. In fact, we now have about 3 times the amount of homicides per thousand of the global average, and it is because of those guns that have been imported in the Caribbean, obviously mostly used by those involved in the narcotics trade, but they're also using those guns to hurt innocent people. That's an issue that many of us would have addressed during this assembly. There's also the looming threat of autonomous weapons. I know that developed countries are using them to target the enemies, but if they get in the hands of the wrong individuals, they can become a serious threat for us. They use facial recognition technology, and they can program these drones to hurt you. I recall some years ago there's one that was used in Venezuela, in which they're trying to take out President Maduro. So certainly the people of Venezuela can identify with the threat of these autonomous weapons. And I'm saying here that it's a very significant threat, and we are certainly advocating for a treaty that will control or maybe ban the production of that type of technology that could be so lethal to our people, and obviously could undermine our development. So there are a myriad of issues, climate, the issues with Cuba and Venezuela. We think what the United States is doing to Cuba is cruel, and we continue to advocate for the sanctions to be lifted. They say, for example, that Cuba is involved in state-sponsored terrorism. They know it's not true, and they need to take them off the list. The situation in Venezuela, we have made a plea as well for them to discontinue the sanctions against Venezuela. They're hurting the Venezuelan people. They're literally contributing to the exodus of Venezuelans because of the hardships that the sanctions have created. But even within the Caribbean region, those of us who benefited from Petrocaribbean, we too are suffering, and we're innocent. We haven't done anything to offend the United States, but at the same time, we can't avail ourselves of fuel from PDVSA, which in the past would have acted as a price stabilization mechanism for Caribbean countries who were getting petroleum products on the Petrocaribbean. So these are some of the inequities that we continue to advocate within the UN forum, and we're hoping that our voices will not fall in deaf ears, and that there will be some transformational changes that will down to the benefit of all.
In your speech, you said that the war was forgotten the developing countries. What do you mean?
Well, I literally quoted Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General. He said that the world has failed developing countries, and that is true. There are so many issues plaguing us, and issues that we did not create. The problem with climate It's not as a result of developing countries, barring a few emerging economies now like China and India that are now involved in the profligate use of fossil fuels. The historical emitters would have been the large, powerful developed countries. So they were the ones who created the problem with climate change, and developing countries are suffering the consequences. Even the whole issue about developed countries making adequate funding available for loss and damage, for adaptation and mitigation, we continue to struggle to get them to respond. And we're the ones who have to contend with these climate events. We have to borrow at high interest rates in order to recover our economies, damage buildings. They're literally destroying lives and livelihoods in developing countries as a result of the profligate use of fossil fuels. And again, we have been pressing through these COPs for them to reduce the emissions, and our plea has fallen on deaf ears to the extent now we're getting dangerously close to that 1.5. And the interesting thing is, if we get up to 1.5, we know, or exceed 1.5, then there will be irreparable damages. And again, it is developing countries that will suffer the most, especially SIDS, small island developing states. And we have made a point too that the issue of climate justice and reparatory justice, they're inextricably linked. I mean, they're the ones who, in the first instance, enslaved our forebears, had them work centuries for free, while they repatriated all the profits to Europe and to North America to build out their economies. As a result, they're extremely wealthy, and they would have benefited from the Industrial Revolution. And the waste from the Industrial Revolution would have polluted our planet to the extent that the same people who suffered under slavery are now suffering climate injustice. So these are very vexing issues, and we think that we have a right to live comfortably on the earth and to enjoy the earth resources, not for the resources to be capitalized by one group of countries called developed countries, but for us to benefit equitably, because, we're fundamentally one and the same people. We all had a common grandmother 200,000 years ago. Notwithstanding, differential in hair texture, color of skin and eyes and so on, we are one and the same. And it means, therefore, there has to be global cooperation, there has to be greater multilateralism as we cooperate to resolve all of the threats facing the planet, facing all of humanity, and not to leave some people impoverished while the mighty and the wealthy continue to live comfortably. Because, at the end of the day, we may be the first, for example, to go based on the climate damages, but their fate will be no different, because their time will come too.
Prime Minister, speaking about IT, what are you agree with this proposed? Somebody proposed to send a special force.
There are many proposals. The reality is the situation in Haiti has to be resolved. I'm of the view it has to be internally led. And I'm a little disappointed in the sense that the Prime Minister Henry, is not taking the kind of leadership. What seems to be required now is a broad-based government that can provide the kind of leadership with the support of the international community, to have this multilateral force to assist with the stabilization of the country, to address the issue of the gangs, while at the same time providing financial resources to deal with the humanitarian crisis, and also to concurrently restore the democratic institutions so that they can have presidential elections and to elect a new president as soon as possible. So that is the general framework, and again, as I said before, it has to be Haitian-led and supported by the regional and international community.
What are the major problems that the people from the Caribbean countries are facing right now?
Well, the most significant threat for us at this point is climate change, and it is the most significant existential threat facing all of humanity. So, we continue to advocate strenuously. We've even taken the matter to the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea in Hamburg. The hearing continues until the 25th, started on the 11th of September. And we are literally trying to hold these large polluters accountable so that we can protect our lives and livelihoods in the Caribbean. So climate change is most significant. We also have the issue of debt. We've had to borrow repeatedly to repair damaged infrastructure, and that in itself would have created a debt overhang. So we also need to find creative ways to place our debt on a sustainable pathway. We've been pushing the international community to provide debt restructuring, debt swaps, or debt for climate swaps. and other mechanisms to assist us to achieve some level of debt sustainability. But again, they have not been very responsive, and we just have to continue to fight on. I have to take the opportunity to thank President Maduro, in that he would have assisted a number of Caribbean countries, including Antigua and Barbuda, with a partial debt write-off of 50% of the amounts owed for the petroleum products, and that in itself would have helped to reduce our debt to GDP. I believe Jamaica, St. Vincent and Grenadines and other countries that have benefited. And you know what is interesting, you have a country that is struggling, providing that kind of relief for others, and you find wealthy countries, even the United States in this hemisphere, which is the wealthiest country on the planet, has not been or have not been as responsive as even countries that do not quite have resources. So kudos to President Maduro and the government and people of Venezuela for the responsiveness to the needs of the Caribbean people.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister Browne, for your time with Telesur today. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Blessings. Good.